Krebs could make almost no abstractions. He could count, only with great effort, to just beyond 20. He could make no quantum leaps, no intuitive strokes of genius. His mind, he knew, was more powerful than hers by far, more intelligent perhaps, but his genius was of a different nature. He could identify with his beginnings and hers. He could remember more and better than any of his own ancient clan. He could even force her to remember. But in her he sensed the youth, the vitality of a newer form. She had diverged again, and he had not. Jean M. Auel. Welcome to this week's episode of Warfare, Advancement, and Revisionism. My name is Preston Floyd, and as always, I'm your host. I'd like to thank everyone for joining me for this special bonus episode for the week of the 4th of July, with me preparing to go out of town and just work being crazy. I haven't had time to really script out too much of my regular episode, so I figured I'd do this little bonus episode I've been kind of poking around, just working on in my spare time. So yeah, this is, as you could guess from the quote, this is a kind of a review and talk about the book by Jean M. Auel, Clan of the Cave Bear. And this is a pretty interesting title. It is the first book in the Earth's Children series, Clan of the Cave Bear, again by Jean M. Auel. This is the second time I've read this book. The first was a few years ago after I had heard about it in like a couple of kind of ancient, fictitious, historical reading lists. And when I found a copy during a sale that my county library had, they have these sales every quarter or so to kind of remove excess or outdated copies of books. And I reread it, last month, kind of in preparation for this episode. And again, I've done some research on the author and just kind of things that she talks about in the book. I believe there are 7 books in total as of now. A new one released a few years ago, I believe. But this is just going to be talking about the first book. But let's start off with a brief talk about the author. Jean Marie Untinen, was born in Chicago, Illinois in 1936 to her Finnish immigrant parents. And I liked that fact that in Finland she used her maiden name hyphenated with her married name, Untinen Auel. It's a nice acknowledgement of her family history and good marketing. Now, she was the second of 5 children. She married her husband, Ray Auel, after they had graduated high school. She was 18 at the time, and the couple quickly had 5 children of their own. And Auel worked a number of positions at the American technology firm Tektronix, which is kind of like it still technically exists. It's part of a larger umbrella of companies now, but it was really kind of in the space of creating early computer parts and like technical type pieces for larger machinery. And while working there, she began college at the age of 28 at the University of Portland. And she was working full-time during this period as well. So, she was doing a lot. But eventually, she finished her, I believe she got an MBA from University of Portland. So, she wasn't trained as a historian or an anthropologist or archaeologist or anything like that. However, she did, eventually kind of, come to enjoy the field. And the book was written in 1980. So she did not start this series until later in her life, and I believe she was 44, if I remember correctly, when the first book was published. Her children, of course, because she had her family so young, they had just kind of all started to move out for college, and she was, she didn't really have to work. I think her husband and her together had, made good money, and eventually, she didn't have to work, and she was kind of, bored with the technical aspect at Tektronix, and she served in a number of positions there. I think she started as a clerk, she became a technical writer for a number of years, and then moved on, up until she became a manager in the mid 70s. So once her children were out, she kind of got the idea for a story set during the Ice Age, and this is set around somewhere between about 30,000 years ago to about 25,000 years ago. No, I'm sorry. 30,000 to 25,000 BCE is when she sets it. At least that's generally where she imagined it to take place. So it's right around the time that the Neanderthals are interacting with the Cro-Magnon humans, beginning to move into Europe. And I haven't really used the term Cro-Magnon much. It's still used, but it is slightly outdated. But Cro-Magnons were kind of like the term for the early modern humans moving into Europe. They're the first Homo sapiens becoming European, I guess, for lack of a better term. And the clan, the eponymous clan of the Cave Bear, are a group of Neanderthals. And Auel did a very thorough research on this, with, at least at the time, very cutting-edge research. And she read a lot. She did a lot of outside reading. She took survival classes to kind of learn how to make things like lean-tos, construct ice caves. She learned how to create fire using the most primitive of methods, tanning leather. She practiced napping stone with a couple of experts who had studied with the Aboriginal peoples. I think the name was John Riggs, I believe. It may have been Jim. I can't remember off the top of my head. I didn't take that down in my notes here. However, so she also did a lot of reading with some, a lot of travel, kind of following along in the places she read about in terms of old Europe. She, of course, did a lot of study of Maria Gimbutas, who, of course, is a very famous archaeologist, one of the big icons of the field for her generation. And she was very influential in a lot of research. And I believe, a lot of archaeologists and, anthropologists specializing in that period with those people have a lot of respect for her work, because she did do so much research. And they felt like, capture a lot of truth in her writing, or at least, if not necessarily 100% truth, then definitely certain aspects that were very hard to get across in, your drier, more technical, analysis and studies and writing about these people. And the book follows a couple of characters, but the two primary characters are Ayla and Kreb. Now, Kreb is a Neanderthal. He is physically deformed. He has one arm. One of his eyes is very weak. And actually, I believe, and I've heard it in a couple of places, but I didn't see it specifically mentioned by Jean or any of the people interviewing her, but Kreb is actually based on a skeleton of a Neanderthal male found in Shanidar Cave, which is now located in modern day Iran, I believe. And it had a number of Neanderthal remains, and then, of course, later Homo sapiens moved in. I think there are some dating right to the end of the Younger Dryas, or right in the middle of the Younger Dryas period, where they found around 40 individuals that they believe were either Natufian or related to the Natufian. But this individual also had a single arm. She definitely based this on like a real individual, or the character of Kreb on a real individual, at least physically speaking. But the actual place that this novel is, or the location that this novel is kind of representing, is actually the ancient Crimean Peninsula. And this is again during the kind of the one of the high points of the last ice age, but before the Younger Dryas. So it was the last glacial maximum, I believe. Although I didn't write that down 100%. But it's during the last ice age. It may have been before the last maximum, before the Younger Dryas. I'd have to go back through my notes on that one. I should have looked that up earlier. But regardless, the other character that this follows, Ayla, is again a young Homo sapien woman. In fact, when the novel starts, she is just around 5 years of age. There is an earthquake that kills Ayla's mother and family, and Ayla is kind of lucky to have survived, and she's alone in the woods, and she's attacked by a cave lion who scars her, but she's found by the clan of the Cave Bear as they are migrating from their cave, which was also affected by that earthquake. They're having to leave their old cave because of the seismic activity. And along the way, they find the girl. And the Neanderthals in this are very wary of Homo sapiens. They are referred to in the book as the others. Whenever the Neanderthals are talking about Ayla's people, they're always referred to as the others. And the leader of the clan of the Cave Bear is Kreb's brother, Brun. Brun has a son named Broad, who's, as you can tell, it can sometimes get a little confusing if you're not paying the best of attention to the book. And that's one of the things I like about the clan names. They're all very short, 1 or 2 syllable names. But Kreb is the younger brother, the deformed brother of Brun. But because of his uniqueness and his mother's kind of sacrifice, who was the clan medicine woman, she was able to kind of get them to spare Kreb from the normal type of exposure that one might expect to see from hunter-gatherer groups. And you can tell, it's very easy to see why Kreb takes pity on her. The clan considers Ayla ugly. She is very much not like them. And, Kreb himself is not particularly good looking, at least by Neanderthal standards. So he definitely feels a sense of kinship in some way with this girl. And he is very much, like all the people in this book, they are very much ruled by their superstitions. But one of the good things that Auel does, these people have their traditions and their superstitions, but they all have a kind of way of talking themselves out of these superstitions. If they really want to, they very much they find reasons around certain things, or at least the main character, Kreb, does. But he's not doing this because he's necessarily selfish. He might be doing that subconsciously. I think that could be argued on a deeper read. But he is very much cognizant of his role as his clan's Moog Ur, which is their word for shaman, Moog Ur. So he is very much reflective. He's a very introspective character. He's always thinking. And he uses his kind of insights about, I guess, the nature of Ayla compared to himself and his people. And he kind of understands that she, despite being a bit of an outcast like him, and them sharing certain more superficial traits, he understands that Ayla is different from him in ways that he can't explain, and that the clan can't explain. And because of these differences, he's able to easily rationalize why she should be treated differently. And that may sound kind of rough, but no, he treats her differently to help her survive. Kreb very much cares for Ayla like a daughter very early in the story. And they do have a more complicated relationship towards the middle and end of the book. But he never kind of abandons his love for her as a father, essentially. Now Ayla is, again, she's very young. She does not understand the clan in quite the same way. Some of their customs and how they communicate are very alien to her, and they put her off. The rituals that they undergo kind of scare her in several scenes. But she very much wants to belong to this group. She is adopted by, again, Kreb and Kreb's sister, who is the clan's medicine woman, a position that she inherited from her mother, who is also the mother of Brun and Kreb, the leader and the shaman, respectively. Excuse me. And Isa has had a hard time having a child of her own, and her mate was not very supportive. So she also really cares for the girl, and she very much wants to make her a medicine woman. And as she doesn't have children of her own, at least at the start of the book, this is one of those things that the clan as a whole kind of doesn't really want to have happen, because she's an outsider. That Isa should have a woman from her line, a daughter, take her place. And Kreb and Isa, they also have their own brother-sister kind of relationship that is also a little weird in terms of other things. At some point, they kind of are almost married. It's not the same. It's not necessarily a sexual thing. It's just that Isa's husband, I believe, dies or leaves her, and then Kreb has to kind of adopt his sister and this girl, and they kind of share a home together, or a sub cave together, a hearth. Technically, they have their own. All the little family units have their own hearths and fires that they tend. And this is where you get to some of the differences between Neanderthals and the Cro-Magnons. The Neanderthals are very much more instinctual than humans. They learn things through more ancestral, instinctual memories rather than being taught. Um, Auel kind of has it that the Neanderthals really don't speak. There is dialogue in this book. There's quite a bit of it, actually. But you learn kind of through their conversations that they're not actually speaking the way that I am now or you are when you're talking to someone, and they're not listening the way that you're listening to my voice right now. They use kind of shorter single syllable grunts and things like that, but they also have a kind of an intricate sign language that they are using to communicate ideas and the like. And that is something that was, very kind of popularized by a lot of studies at the time that Auel was writing this book, and is still something that is being researched today. Now, recently, because of newer finds, there is evidence that Neanderthals, at the very least, had the bones capable of speech like Homo sapiens. Of course, whether or not they had the same kind of vocal cords is impossible to say because, flesh deteriorated from anything that, old a long time ago. So it is very possible that, Neanderthals did communicate more like us. But the idea that the Neanderthals are communicating, or at least think differently, and have different strengths to their cognitive process than humans, are very much something that is still, believed to have happened or believed to have been developed by the Neanderthals. One of the key theories that humans, or that Homo sapiens were able to overcome the Neanderthals eventually was because of their more complex social structures, or more organized social structures might be a better way to say it. They were able to communicate easier, and also, of course, the Homo sapien ability to create more advanced technological weapons. The Neanderthals are described as being shorter and squatter, but more powerfully built, which again is something that we do see in the archaeological record. Ayla is taller than, I believe, every member of the clan. She does not stoop the same way they do, which also causes problems for her with Brood, the son of Brun, the clan leader. He's the antagonist of this story. Not that he has much power. He's a very kind of pathetic individual, at least in terms of characterization. He is not something that he's more of a he is very much the antagonist in terms of he mainly is there just to kind of make Ayla feel bad about herself. He does kind of participate in some violence and instigate violence of specific kinds against Ayla. I won't get into too much specifics because I don't want this episode to be removed from any services. I'm not sure how in depth I can go to some details. But that's kind of the height of his... He very much wants Ayla to feel small. He wants power over her because he feels like she gets attention that she does not deserve. She is allowed to participate in certain activities that no other woman has been allowed to participate in. She is very much... kind of a foil to Broad. He feels like that he should be the center of attention because he is the son of the chief's mate. And that is another thing that they talk about. There is some talk that they don't understand that men mating with women results in children, which is something I don't know if I necessarily buy that. the clan is, they understand that, men and women living together create children, but they're not aware that it's sexual activity. They believe it's a case of the woman's totemic animal, the spirit that guides and protects them, is overcome by another spirit. Now, whether the spirit is her mate or just her mate's totem animal, they kind of go back and forth on that in a couple of places in the story. And Ayla's totem is the cave lion because she was wounded. This is a very powerful totem. It's something that no woman has ever had before as her kind of spiritual protector. And Kreb gave that to her because, A, she was attacked by one. He had to give her one, and he very much meditated on what her animal could be. And he also felt like, oh, she's ugly. No one's going to want to take her as their mate. So, she probably does have a strong spirit preventing a male from bonding with her. However, Ayla, being a little bit more disconnected from the spiritual world of the Neanderthals, she begins to believe that the act of sex produces children. And she kind of comes up with this theory after her encounters with Broad and her meeting with another woman. I forget her name. She shows up in like kind of a group meeting of several of the clans in the region of Neanderthals. And this woman had encountered 3 other men who had abused her. And she conceived a child with these people, or with one of these men, and that child was very similar to Ayla's own son, Dirk. And again, I'm not going to spoil too much because I do think this is worth a read. It's not a very long book. It's only let's see, double check my chapters here. It's a little bit longer than I thought. It's about 500 pages, give or take a couple, depending on your copy. But it's very simple words. There's nothing that's very, philosophical. There's nothing that would, I think, hold you up. And it's very much to the point. It's very, I won't say action oriented because it is very kind of more of a spiritual or a think piece, I'd say. There are some bits of action in it, but the words used are simple. They're easily described. They're descriptive, and they're very easy to understand. It's telling a very straightforward story. There are no long travel scenes. There are scenes where Ayla is kind of on her own due to some interactions he has with the clan and the breaking of their rules. But what you might believe would be a kind of a long, drawn-out couple of chapters, Auel usually just kind of gets to the point. She just tells the events that are important. There's not a lot of scenery chewing other than, just saying what a character sees. If it's not directly involved with moving the plot along, she does not really dwell on it too much, which I appreciate. It kind of matches with her understanding of how Neanderthals viewed the world. So let's see. Where was I in my notes here? Another thing that Auel kind of touches on, and I've mentioned this a little bit, but the Neanderthals do take part in a couple of ceremonies that involve psychotropics. And that quote that I read at the start of this is a part where Kreb and Ayla share kind of a a psychotropic trip where Kreb is kind of able to almost telepathically, he does telepathically connect to her, like on a like kind of an animal instinctual level. And Ayla can, because of Krebs' telepathic abilities, she's kind of able to follow along with it to some extent. She doesn't quite understand what she's seeing. She just knows how it makes Kreb feel. She can feel Krebs' pain or his understanding of the situation. She can see how that makes him feel, but she can't really see what he's seeing. She more sees the effects of what he's seeing than the actual visions themselves. And that is kind of like one of the sadder parts of the book. Kreb understands, that the others are going to replace his people. And again, yes, once the Cro-Magnons or the early Europeans or the early Homo sapien Europeans move in, the Neanderthals are gone within a very brief period of time. Now, I will say that Auel actually predicted, or did not predict, but she actually went out on a limb on that. There was a very, highly debated topic of whether humans and Neanderthals mated. There had been a very sizable community in the archaeological field that said, no, there's no way humans and Neanderthals had, procreated. Homo sapiens and Neanderthals probably thought each other were ugly and disgusting. The Neanderthals were, while they were, closer to humans than probably any other thing, they probably lived in much more animalistic conditions than Homo sapiens. They probably would have found them more animal than human. And that's something that did not change until fairly recently. I heard a couple of lectures in the early 2000s where that was still being held out by a number of people. But, of course, DNA evidence recently has shown that it did indeed happen. Now, it's not a large amount, but there is definitely Neanderthal DNA in humans. So that is something Auel got right. And to go back to the point about psychotropics, this also predates the stone ape theory, or at least I guess the formal theory of the stoned ape theory. This has always kind of been something that was debated, especially in the 60s and 70s. That humans had maybe been experimenting with wild mushrooms, and that this had kind of given people, more imaginative abilities, I guess. It's something that sparked human imagination, and maybe even had helped the development of human religion, or at least laid the groundwork for humans to develop a religion. Now, again, this idea had been kind of floated for a number of years in the 60s and 70s, but I believe it was formally proposed, in 1992, I want to say. I could be wrong about that. I may have been getting some stuff kind of backwards, but I know Terence McKenna, his book Food of the Gods was a very big part of that theory. And his claim was that it helped the transition from Homo erectus to Homo sapiens, which again, I think that's kind of a wild misunderstanding of how foods affect us. It's not going to cause us to evolve differently. It may inspire or terrify, depending on your trip, individuals, and that those individuals can kind of spread that knowledge, but it's not going to affect the course of human evolution. But yeah, so Auel, again, she got some things right. She got some things wrong, but she was working with very popular, widely accepted theories at the time. So I think she deserves a lot of credit for this. And apparently, while I was researching this, I learned that there is a movie version of this book. Daryl Hannah plays the older Ayla. But yeah, so I highly encourage you to read this book. It's a very good one. The sequel is The Valley of Horses, where it kind of follows on from the end of this book. And Ayla becomes the primary character going forward. She becomes the complete focus of the book. Because I know I said I wasn't going to spoil it, but spoiler alert, Kreb dies. Of course, we found the skeleton in Shanadar, at least the real person that Kreb was based on. He was laid to rest in a cairn in a cave, and that fate does befall Kreb, unfortunately. Though he does end on a hopeful note, at least in the grand scheme of things. His understanding of the world, kind of, despite his fears and misgivings and his knowing that the clan as a larger group as a whole may be numbered, he does hold out hope that there are parts of the clan that will live on forever, and that is definitely something I think that is conveyed quite well and quite beautifully, really. Auel does a great job, despite, again, her prose being simplistic, which, again, I believe is a stylistic choice. I don't think it's because she's a bad writer. She's a very good writer. I think the simplicity of the text helps it deliver a very well, yeah, despite the text being simplistic, it does deliver a very eloquent and powerful message overall. And I do have the other books. I got them all at the same time. I just never picked up Valley of Horses because why did I stop reading? I actually started Valley of Horses. I think I read the first chapter and I stopped. I believe it was because I was also reading a book on... Yeah, it was William. I remember. I had finished Clan of the Cave Bear, started Valley of the Horses, but then I remembered I had bought a copy of William L. Schreer's The Fall of the Third Republic, and I loved his Rise and Fall of the Third Reich book, which, of course, talks about Nazi Germany, but The Fall of the Third Republic talks about France's perspective from the run-up to and very... end of the Nazi invasion of France in the kind of the early days of World War II. So I got sidetracked with that, and I just never got back to it. But I do have Valley of the Horses packed up in my bag, ready for my trip this weekend. So I will probably do an episode on that. I know we've kind of gone back in time. I try to, keep things focused on the period we're talking about, but yeah, I think this was a good episode, or a good time to talk about this going forward, because much like the period in the book, we are in a transitional period. Instead of a transition from Neanderthals being a dominant species to Homo sapiens, we're transitioning from, or beginning to see the transitions from the roving hunter-gatherer bands to more organized sedentary groups. Although, again, this is a work in progress, and the mobile bands are still vastly outnumbering the sedentary groups. But yeah, so I hope you all have enjoyed. This episode will be out at the normal time. If you have any questions or feedback, please feel free to comment on any of my YouTube videos. Or you can reach me at waradrevpod@gmail.com. You can direct message me on Twitter. However you'd like to get in touch, please do. And wherever you're listening to me, please like, subscribe, download, whatever you do on that particular service. Help get the show trending. This has been a very big year, and it still is, but I would like to see it grow a little bit more. But yeah, if you're in the U.S., I hope you have a good 4th of July tomorrow, and have had a good weekend. If you are international, I hope you have had a good, normal, regular week. But yeah, thank you all for listening and joining me. I hope you've enjoyed, and I hope to see you here next time. Thank you all. Goodbye.